we're just in a place right now as a nation, we just lack leaders. If you think your ideology is the only way, it's just false. Power and money can make you justify anything. That's when we get really, really dangerous. Be the leader that you want to be led by.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Adrian Crawford. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, just to really start us off strong, I know a lot of people within the church space listen to this podcast, and what are your thoughts on these ICE raids?
Oh, man, you're starting off just in the deep end of the pool today. I think that this is a very, again, as I've said before, we're going from a complicated to a complex world. This is a very complex situation. You think about immigration, you think about policies that have been put in place. And so I think, and also our current political kind of atmosphere just makes for it to not be a great situation. I do believe there needs to be reform around immigration. I think there needs to be better protection around our borders, better protocols for people coming into our country. I think people should be allowed to come in our country, but I do believe there should be very clear ways that people come into our country that are legal and things like that. But also, I think because of our current political atmosphere, this isn't about, especially what's happening in California, this isn't about safety. This is about, again, very clear where, out in California, it's a blue state and very blue, very Democratic, and having a very red Republican president. And so as soon as something happens, and also our current president, President Trump, his kind of approvals with the tariffs and things like that haven't been great. So anytime he gets in these moments, he goes to authoritative leadership. Instead of influential leadership, he goes to authoritative. So now he's doing that. And I think this is a very short-sighted, in my opinion, deal. Because when you start doing that, what's going to happen is at some point in time, there's going to be a Democrat in office, and they're going to do an overreach like this situation. And I just think this is another one of those examples in our country of just the lack of actual leadership, the lack of people being able to navigate things, being a non-executive president, doing what's right. I'm not saying there should be ways that there should be peaceful protests, but if it does get beyond being peaceful, there needs to be that. So I think, Governor Gavin Newsom, if things get out of hand, he needs to be able to handle that, and they need to be able to do it. And if they can't, then yes, you do bring in, you bring the National Guard, you bring in the federal, but to get all the way to bring in Marines and things like that, they didn't even bring people in like that for, when there was the
there's been
riots.
Far more violent situations that the National Guard hasn't been deployed into.
Yeah, and you listen, and I'm telling you, a lot of it, and I heard one thing that was said the other day, and again, I'm going to be really clear, it's that there are things that, and I know this won't be popular, there are things that President Trump does that I actually like, but this is one of the things I don't. I think you can just tell by the language he's using. He kept saying, we're going to do law and order. We're going to have law and order. That is that is one of those signal words to the far right base of he's a person that's against crime or whatever. And so again, this is all political, and I hate that because human beings are involved. Whenever this stuff starts to happen, I think our politicians forget humans are involved, and they'll say it's about the best of humanity. I don't believe that. I believe a lot of times it is about continuing to push their political agenda, or they're looking to try to get more points, approval ratings, things like that. And again, this is just right now we have a Republican president in office. If it was a Democrat president, again, there will be some other thing that they would be doing for the exact same thing. So this isn't just about President Trump and everyone thinking how evil he is or whatever your thoughts are. This is just about our political system right now of people living in the extremes and pandering to their extremes instead of leading. You can't pander, you have to lead.
Can you describe more of what you think is happening behind the scenes, and then we'll kind of move on from this and get to our topic today, but both within what you think is happening at a national government level, but then also more locally, even when you think about like Tallahassee is where we're located, and there were some raids, I think a week or two ago, that were pretty massive and are severely going to impact the community. But the response here, and even comparing it to some of the response on the West Coast, is very different, and there's so many different things that play into that, but I would be interested in hearing your take more from an authentic leadership standpoint.
Yeah, I think especially right here in the city that we live in, it's interesting because we live in a very red state now with a very Republican governor, but the city we live in, the county, is one of the most liberal counties in Florida. We're a very liberal county in Tallahassee. And that's a lot of times how it is in college towns. I think the ICE raids that happen here, again, they are. I think how things have played out. Here's my biggest thing. I don't fundamentally at times disagree with the thought. I disagree with the action, how things have played out. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you think about the tariff situation, right? It was like, man, it wasn't just about tariff, but it's like how it rolled out. What it looked like it was really no real plan for this whole thing. And I just think that's the thing. I think right now it's not about, man, what is the best thing? And we'll probably get into this in our episode today. What's the best thing for people? What's the best way? As a leader, your responsibility is to, especially as a government official, is to care for people. Now, caring for people sometimes is making tough decisions. That's not a like, hey, caring for people means that you let people do whatever they want. No, sometimes, I love my children. I've had to invoke discipline to my children to help them. So this isn't about that. But at the end, you can see what people's heart desire is by the way that it plays out. It's not only what you do. It's not only what you make, but it's why you make it, because that then plays out. And so I think right now we're just living in a time to where we have it is a certain way that people want things to be done because they now have power. And it's not about, in my opinion, what is the best thing for the flourishing of humanity going forward. And the same thing, if there was a Democrat that would sit in office, it would have been the same thing. It was the same thing that happened during President Biden's run, that it was things that were done that were not best for humanity. It was best for the political agenda. And so I think even when it comes to a local level, it's the same thing. All that starts to affect. And so again, I think I was sitting with a local politician, matter of fact, last night, and we were talking about it. And one of the things he was talking to me about was like how he has to be very undercover moderate. He kind of more sits like center, maybe a little bit left or whatever. But he was talking about, man, like he has to sit moderate. But when he actually wants to run eventually for higher offices, he's got to pick a side, which again, that's a bigger issue. It's primaries, because to actually survive in a primary, you have to lean far right, far left. That'd be one of the biggest things I'd get rid of. There would be no primaries. People run, they run, and let the best person win. But when you do that, because now you are rewarded for living on the crazy edges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I think is so challenging is we talk a lot about how clarity is kind. It's a form of compassion. And so I think even within all of this process, the challenge is, I know we talk or you hear a lot about the due process and checks and balances, but there really is such a lack of clarity on how do you become a citizen of the United States, what that process looks like, how long it takes, everything that goes into that. And then also when there is a line that has been drawn that hasn't been enforced, and then there is a massive enforcement of the line. There's even such a lack of clarity of who is going to be now impacted by that. And that, I think, to me, that's one of the biggest challenges, or something to wrap my mind around in the situation.
No, and you're right. And I think that sometimes we have to realize, like, you have people who come over to this country that maybe their parents came in here illegally and now they were born here in this country, even though it was illegal. It's like, man, these are kids, you know what I mean? And the fact of doing that. But again, it's like, there's reality that Democrats sat in office and had a chance to fix it. But you know what though, it's a lot of policies make sense in these kind of ideology, in this kind of like framework when you're sitting around this little, your little think tanks and everything like that. So it deals in real life. Yeah. You know what? You can have all your views until now. If you're sitting in that seat and you start to realize the level of times of violence that come in, you realize that, man, there's terrorism and terrorists who are actually coming across our borders and things like that. Now, when you sit in that seat, you got to look at that report. You get the daily briefing and you're like, hey, X amount of people maybe got in our country. There's a certain amount of sleeper cells and many are maybe coming through the border right during the South. You now have to change your ideology. That is why that's why at times, we saw President Obama in his office. He had one idea and thought about the border and then how he enforced things. He enforced things in a different way. Not that was a typical Democratic way. Again, it's what you're saying is that I think when it's all said and done, there has to be people who decide to lead and willing to be unpopular no matter where you land. Like, that's the biggest thing. Are you willing to be unpopular? And I mean, on both sides. Like, that's what I think. When you're really governing well, it should be one of those things where people at times do not know where you land, because it is. It's like there hasn't been a line. So you can't just go, we're going to draw this hard line here. You got to build into it. There's got to be a very clear plan, because lives are at stake. And I think that's one of my biggest issues with this administration right now, is that at the end of the day, it feels like things are just like, it's haphazard. They just go do stuff. And again, and I feel like the last administration was like, he didn't do anything. So it's just like you get in these situations where I feel like we're just in a place right now as a nation where, again, like we've been saying here, we just lack leaders. I mean, strong leaders who lead from a place of their strength, but also empathy. And those things are not warring together. Mm-hmm. There are people who are willing to be strong and defend, but they also don't just wield the sword just to do it, or wield their authority just to do it. They wield their authority because they know if they do this, even if they're unpopular, it's going to be better for people. That is one thing we really, really lack right now.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that there is opportunity within our current context to actually die to your reputation, to be willing to be unpopular and still get the visibility that you need in order to make impact? Or do you think something has to change in order for someone to even be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, I do. There was somebody on Instagram and TikTok who is probably the best I've ever seen a politician leverage it.
I love when he's on my feed.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Jeff Jackson. He's unbelievable. I think he was a congressman from North Carolina. Now he's an attorney general. And man, I'll never forget seeing when he would pop up and he would just explain what the bills were. Even though he was a Democrat, he would just talk about it. But when you would listen to him talk, it was non-anxious. At times, he would like criticize his own base. He just brought people behind the curtain. He gave them a real look. See, that's what I think is the issue, is that a lot of our leaders right now, they treat people like they're just stupid. They don't they'll lie and say things, and we're like, we can see with our own eyes what this is. And so I look at a guy like him who went and, man, he won an election there, went attorney general, won that election there as attorney general, how he's now prosecuting a lot of these. I mean, there's certain like apps right now that, I can't remember what app it was, but they're actually funneling a lot of terrorist activity and a lot of like illegal activity happens there. And a bunch of attorney generals are going after that group right there. I mean, I'm watching this, man. There's some bravery that's there, and it's about what's best. And so I think you can do it. But again, like I say it all the time, you cannot lead anything you're afraid to lose. I think why we don't see that is because I don't think we have people who are willing to take that gamble. Are they willing to take the gamble to say, you know what, I may be disliked by my side, and really look at the political atmosphere to understand, like, man, you may be running right now. And as you're running, you may have some leverage on your side where, you know, I can lean a little bit more to the left. And what I mean by lean there is to be able to try to learn and to grow. And again, if you think your ideology is the right ideology, I mean, this is the only way, it's just false. Life is great. There's wisdom that is there. When you look at Jesus and his writings, I mean, man, he was very clear about things. You would not be able to peg Jesus, as much as people want to say, about where he lands. Because there's certain parts of his community that seem very liberal, social, everything. Man, going out there feeding all these people, they have to pay nothing. The first community of Jesus was, man, sell your goods, give them to everybody else. That sounds like a freaking communist, like, you know, it feels like a lot of far right people couldn't stand the Jesus community. But also he stood up for things that were like, man, he stood up for the idea of like the unborn. He stood up. He had certain things about ethics, sexually, on and on. And so I think that's where you wouldn't have known where he landed. But I think we have to have leaders who can lead in that type of way, in a non-anxious way. And I do believe it's possible.
Thank you for being willing to talk about that. I feel like we could do the whole episode.
No,
on
I
that.
know. Now, as we started talking about it, I got a little bit worried. You know what I'm saying? You know, our current administration, boy, you say something negative, man, I may mess around and so
whoever Olivia Pope is behind the scenes for them, they're coming for us.
That's what I'm saying, man. Just a young boy in El Salvador in one of them little prisons, you know.
Oh my gosh. Well, but you know what? Because we do happen to be, you know, a few people away from people that are involved as well. And this may even, like, if that's going to happen, it's definitely going to happen after I say this. But everything with Elon and like their whole relationship breakup and all the media stuff is actually like, it is fully on like a plan to distract from what's happening. And that, like, we have confirmation of that from people. I'll tell you, I was talking to you about it yesterday. But
really? Yeah, dude, it's wild. Elon, him, their whole deal. And again, here's and this is, we'll move on. The problem with the whole thing with Elon, like, nobody's dumb. Like everybody keeps thinking like, and this is where just because you're a genius does not mean you're a genius in everything. Like some people who I respect, some thought leaders out there, they're like, well, don't you want your best minds? Yes, but you have to understand the framework of what you're doing. That's like me going, I think I'm a decently smart human, right? But I don't go into like, I have no idea about how to launch a rocket or what, like, I would have to understand all the content. And again, I'm like smart enough to be able to do that. But I'm just saying, like, just because he's able to do a business, and you're talking about like he's built stuff from the ground up, not something that's been established for 250 years. All this stuff for Doge, and it's going to cut all. And we're saying it did not cut anything they thought it was going to cut. And now here's the other thing. Elon put himself in there because there's prosecution that he was going to face that now he doesn't have to face. There's a bunch of money and resources he gets from government contracts. It's amazing. Everybody that talks about who wants smaller government are the dudes who literally make their money off of government. Elon, SpaceX would not be what it was if it was not for government contracts. Peter Thiel and Palantir would not be what it was if it wasn't for government contracts. Right. And so again, I'm not saying that these guys shouldn't do that, but what we have to realize,
and I will say, and we're not just saying that, we work with people within that industry.
Yes, and it's like it is a money deal, and it's about power and money, and that's what we have to come to.
Get your bread, but just say that.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, no, this is what it's about. You getting your money? Say less. Like I get it, man. No, I have no problem. That's why at times I'm okay with like there's things I don't like in his leadership with President Trump, but there's something I'm okay with that because I just know where he's at. We don't like it, but sometimes it's just like raw and uncut. You're like, oh, you're just telling us what we always kind of maybe thought, you know what I'm saying? Like when he's making deals with countries, he's not walking in there saying, all right, well, hey, we're doing this for our democracy to spread. He's like, no, I'm going there and get this bag. I'm going to get this bag. I'm going to get some rare earth minerals. I'm going to get this oil. Like, I mean, he's just and here's the thing. I'm like, oh, I can respect that, even though I may not agree with something, but the lie of we're trying to spread American democracy. I'm like, are we stupid? That's never worked. It's literally never worked. In all the wars we've gone through, trying to spread American democracy has never, ever worked. You know what I'm saying? Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, pick a place. It has never worked. So my point is this, is that I think when it's all said and done, it's people, like you said, it's willing to be honest about where we're at, what's going on, and stop giving people, listen, we're all smart enough to read between the lines. And so again, I'm just looking for authentic people willing to communicate that.
What's your take on RFK's transition from being solo to support of Trump and how that's played out?
When it's all said and done, I'm not sitting RFK, I don't sit in his shoes, but what I do know is this, what you see with these guys, and you don't see a lot of dudes stand anymore. A lot of people on like principle of what they say they stand on.
Yeah, because he's slowly had this very subtle
because it's power.
Shift.
Because now all of a sudden he wasn't going to win. He thought he could win. He wasn't going to win. Now he has a chance to be in a situation where he felt. And again, I know how he's justified. Well, now I can at least be in a place where I can make real change. I thought I was going to make anyway around healthcare, whatever, all the stuff he's trying to do with health and whatever. But I'm like, yeah, my man. But like, I struggle with that. I struggle literally knowing someone. Like, imagine I know someone. Not just I know about them. I know them, and I don't like them. And I'm saying very clear, I don't like them, and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, they offer me a position. I'm like, who I am, I cannot be like, oh yeah, like I just want to go serve you. I go serve what you're trying to do. When I don't agree with that, there's just not a lot of principled people anymore. It's people who are power hungry and money, and we can so easily listen. Power and money can make you justify anything. You can make it sound right. It can sound strategic. It can sound like good leadership. You can call it compromise. This is just what you have to do. But it never comes to a point where like, no, do you have any core values? Do you have any core mission? And are you violating that? And I just think a lot of times people don't have values. Their values are not real values. They're aspirational values. They're not real values. And so but nobody wants to be honest about their real values. Some people's real value is money and power. They care about money and power. Fine. Then say that, because now when you flip and switch, I get it, because that's a value. But when you say your value is about this thing, and it sounds all, it's very aspirational, it's very utopian of like, I care about world peace, or I care about, harmony for people, or I care about the environment. But then like you start having opportunities to make changes in the environment, and you don't do anything about it, because if you do something about it, then you may lose some of that funding that you're actually getting for your political campaign and stuff like that. that. So I tell people, we'll see what your values are when it actually costs you something. And I think a lot of things that these politicians spout out are not things they do. Now, I know some who really do live behind what they're saying. So I don't want to say all politicians, but a lot of what we see in Washington is that it's just individuals who want power, and they've learned how to play the game, and they're learning to morph in whoever they need to be in order to play the game. It's like playing the game Clue, right? It's like, man, like, is it Colonel Mustard? You know what I'm saying? Miss Scar, like, I mean, like, they just play different characters and whatever. Yeah, Miss, you know what I'm saying? Mr. P, was that Miss Peacock? All that. Yeah, yeah. And so it's just, yeah. And I was like,
talking about Mario Kart.
I know. That's what I'm saying. You said Miss Peach. I'm like, I thought you were playing I thought you were playing a Gen.
Playing a different
game.
I
thought you were playing a Gen Z version of Clue. I'm like, I haven't played Clue in a while.
I love Clue. I was obsessed.
Yeah, anyways, dude, shout out. Which, by the way, if you've never watched, again, I know you like older movies. That was one of my favorite older movies watching. Clue. In the mid '80s is Clue. Now again, elite.
I'm obsessed.
Elite,
I would do anything to like role play that game or something. Dude, you know what I mean? Maybe without the. No, I'd do it with the violence. You know.
Yeah, no, it was really elite. Good show. All right.
So who is your top 3 favorite presidents of all time based off of like principle-based leadership? For those of you who don't know, Adrian is a history nerd.
Yes. Abraham Lincoln for sure
is one.
It's one.
Why?
I think leadership. He dealt with death of a child, a wife who was like literally crazy. To have the resolve to even push to see slavery eradicated when it was not popular. I think we look at it now from the lenses of like, oh yeah, of course. No, I mean, it's like our current country right now. Like half the nation hated him. I mean, listen, we don't remember it. Somebody assassinated him. Like they hated him. But he was willing to do that, even this gamble, even when it wasn't the popular thing, even when his party, a lot of people in his party, if it was about, they wanted to end the war. They didn't want to end slavery. They wanted to end the war. And they were willing to do it if it was going to end the war. And so for him to say, no, this is the right human thing to do. And again, was he perfect? Absolutely not. But I thought he led through that process in such a way. And then I think I also love because of the fact of like what he built into. I mean, he lost so many of his elections before he actually won. So and again, this is a sort of leadership point. So many times the things that you think may be failures or things that have been a part of your past are many times things that are building you in order to be who you need to be. Because I don't think if he had all those, I mean, failure upon failure upon failure, but still kept feeling like he's supposed to run, he would not have had the resolve to actually be tough enough to actually govern the way that he did in a war like he did. And to keep a country from fragmenting and bringing it back together, you got to give him like a ton of credit for that. So I think he's one. The next one probably will be FDR. Again, I think the New Deal, during World War II, after World War II, stuff like that, and during a time, I thought he navigating our country, things like that, I thought was done really, really well. And I think the other one, man, probably would be, I want to say George Washington, maybe, just because he was our first one. And I think that, again, I'm not talking about all the stuff. There was slavery, there was all that stuff. But again, like a guy who was like leading and trying, you're breaking off. He was a disruptor. You're breaking off from the British, from this British Empire to do what they did. He will be there. And another person who I like.
Could you imagine, we try to govern our organization.
Yes.
And the level of stress that comes with. Could you imagine?
Oh no, I'm watching. I know that
being the founder of the government.
No, or
in many ways.
Or watching the fact of I'm watching this this search for Osama bin Laden, the Netflix thing, and watching in President Obama's first term. Like how young he looked, and then by the end of the second, I'm like, dude, that is a level of stress. I'm like that it just the office ages you. You know what I'm saying? It just does because of what you see every day. And let me tell you this: some people would totally disagree. I really did personally. I really liked President Obama, and I wish I would have enjoyed it. I wish I would have been more dialed in, but I was in that current time very much influenced, quote unquote, by a white evangelical world. To where, man, literally, people thought President Obama was the Antichrist. Like he was like the second coming. Like he was the Antichrist they talk about in the book, whatever people deem to see in the Book of Revelation, right?
He was phenomenal at casting vision for what we could be.
He really was. And again, and everybody talks about, oh, even the things they criticized him for. I'm like, oh, he was soft on defense. I'm like, you mean the guy, literally, like, and I'm not saying this is okay. That dude drone strike and killed more people than any president. I'm like, the dude was not. And again, I think, now I'm not saying there's some policies I fundamentally disagree with him on. But what I also realize is this too. It's like being a black man married to a black woman, leading, and like to be somebody who broke through that barrier, and what pressure came with that, and how much people didn't like you because of that. And so you had to navigate that really, really well. The other side of it too is the fact of, I think people don't realize, man, you think about it, from all of what we know about President Obama, there's been no scandal. In the sense of like no marital scandal, no infidelity, whatever. The fact of saying that every day he would come home and at 5 o'clock as he's the president and would eat dinner with his family when his kids were younger. Like he should have been in some areas a poster child for like the right of like talking about family and stuff like that. Now, again, there are things I understand, policies where it was, whether it's through abortion, of the same sex agenda. I totally get that, of why people would, not, when it comes to family, whatever. But on the other side of it, I'm also like, man, like, can we not separate? No, don't like this, but I like this. This was a good thing. The fact of the matter, man, that young people, not just, but especially young black and people of color, got to see someone sit in that office. The fact that the first president my kids remember is Barack Obama. Like, to me, it was never going to be heard of. So I think that's where what he stood for, meaning what he was able to be a breakthrough, actually is why I probably would put him like 4 for me.
Which is actually so crazy. I think I was probably in like 3rd grade or something like that.
It's crazy.
So don't quote me on that. I can't remember. But we, in my little elementary school, we had a voting day. And I was in elementary school for sure.
Yeah.
And we came in and we had those little like
ballot things?
No, they weren't real ballots. It was like a questionnaire on top of the screen. And we had these little keypads and we all had to like vote. And we had I don't remember talking about it. All I remember is coming in that day. And they're like, we're going to do a mock voting day. We had no idea about anything else. So it's basically just everybody, whatever your parents thought. Dude, everybody's parents. So it was just like plastered on the screen.
I know. Because people are like, what is like, yeah, like John, you know what I'm saying? You're over there like Mitt Romney, John McCain.
No.
Like, a lot of people are like Barack Obama, like I seen him hooping. He seems pretty cool. Like, you know
I just remember sitting there and being like, what? I don't know. That's funny. But
well,
anyway.
What's interesting, let me say is what's interesting about having him too as President Obama was the simple fact that when he was doing the like, it was little stuff matters, right? I'll never forget when they were like doing voter registration and they had a picture and he was like in the barbershop. And so if you've ever been to a black barbershop, one of the things is this, they put like, you get the cape on, you get this little white piece of paper they put around, kind of, I don't even know why they do this white piece of paper they put around your neck, whatever that you have, and at the end they do the alcohol, whatever. Anyway, but watching a president like who goes to the same places I go to get a haircut, I was like, dude, there's no way this is real. And again, representation and doing things where you can identify, actually, it does matter. And I think in the future, you're going to see other, black men and women who run for office and have a chance to win an office because he was willing to be a forerunner in that way.
Okay, so yesterday we started talking a little bit about a CEO who kind of brought up the principle of leaders right now are really leading in a terrarium. I keep almost saying, what's the periodic table element? Not titanium. Terrarium. I keep almost saying leaders are leading in a terrarium. That too. But no, in the terrarium. So could you describe a little bit about what that means, your thoughts on that, and maybe even bring in our previous conversation on the current government? What is different now about the position that maybe Trump is in versus what it even looked like when Obama was president? Yeah,
I think that, first of all, what he's talking about that, and it is he is the CEO of BlackRock, which is one of the, it's a big hedge fund, if I'm not mistaken, investment one of the, he's a billionaire from what he started. And so the thing about it, he talks about leading, and it's like and the best way to explain it, like leading in a glass bottle, where you're seeing from every angle, right? Every side somebody's able to look in and see from each side of your leadership. He's saying now today, you can't just say whatever, do whatever, because you're criticized, critiqued on every angle. And so that's this whole thing is like, man, you just can't do whatever. And so now, because of fear of being canceled, also, you say the wrong thing, it affects stock prices depending on what type of industry you're in. So he's like, man, leadership leadership now, it is very much, there's so many opinions. And again, why there's so many opinions? Because social media has created that. There's now access to people that can go instantly to there can be a leaked report, an internal memo that gets sent out. There could be something you say just off the cuff in a meeting that somebody now goes and they recorded it or whatever, and it gets blasted out there. That could affect who they think you are and take a snippet in time. So I understand where he's at in that, and I think that's the difference right now. You look at, we all have opinions. Think about what you just said in the current presidency. That was different than President Obama. Social media was just starting. You know what I mean? You look at it, President Obama came in office in 2008. I mean, I think 2007 was the iPhone. And so like social media, and that's what made President Obama really good, because he leveraged the internet and social to get going with what he was doing. But now the difference is like, man, there's so many different things and platforms and lives and whatever for people to give their opinion. And so there's a lot of things. And on top of that, you can't control the narrative. Before, you could kind of somewhat control the narratives a little bit. You can't control them now. People are going to have whatever thoughts and perspectives. And so it is a difficult time actually to lead. But I also believe that this time of leadership is actually revealing some stuff about leadership in general.
What do you think it's revealing?
I think it's revealing that people used to lead from an authoritative standpoint. That now to lead, which great leadership was never about leading from a place of authority. Great leadership was about leading from a place of influence. Because if you had influence, people naturally gave you authority. Now it's easier because we lived in very much so. There's a certain hierarchy, and this is how you built. But let me tell you this: when you go talk to those people who are older, and they talk about the leaders they really respected, it wasn't the leaders because they were their boss. It was the leaders that influenced them. And I think that what's happening now is that people are going to buck against just authoritative leadership. That's why you feel this push against sometimes what's President Trump, because what we feel is just this authoritative leadership that he starts pushing down. When things get tough, he just, because of my position, I'm going to usurp certain things instead of leading from a place of influence. Great leaders lead from places of influence. And I think what it's starting to reveal, it's revealing that this playing ground, this glass bottle, this terrarium that we're in, is that you're starting to see the lack of actually really good leaders. I think people have been, because of position, they were masked as good leaders, not actually were good leaders. And so I think that's why we're seeing this big deficit of leadership right now, because now people get to see the whole thing, and you cannot just lead from a place of position anymore.
So when you say authoritative, is that synonymous to you as a dictator, or are they a little bit different?
I wouldn't go as far as fully there. But I do think there could be where you can use authoritative leadership in moments you may have to. I'm a parent. There's time I have to use authoritative leadership because of the position I hold, right? Especially when my kids were younger, because they didn't understand. So hey, do not go across the street unless we're with you, right? Why? It's because we wanted to make sure they were safe. So because I was their father, I practice authority, and I use that. I think a dictator, what makes a difference is that you can use authoritative leadership in your position, but what a dictator does, it's not about what's best for people. It's actually about them keeping power and using and showing their power. It's not about showing power for the best, what's best for the people. It's just about showing power, and it's about leveraging and using power and pushing people down. And so I think that's the difference between those two.
Would you say that President Trump is more of a dictator? Who uses authoritative leadership?
Yeah, I think
primarily.
He does. I think if we didn't have, in my opinion, if we did not have the rules and the laws and the things that we have, he fully would be that. Because I think for him, it's all about, he thinks he's right about everything. And so because I think he thinks he's right about everything, I think he would, if he had the full autonomy to do whatever, he 100% would be that way. But though, I think President Biden, he would have been the same way. President Trump is, again, it's the person who's more, President Trump is just it's the wild child, right? It's the prodigal. It's the one everybody's like, okay, this dude isn't. He looks like and he acts like an a-hole. But I also think President Biden was the same way. The same guys who think, I know all the answers, I have it the right way, and I'm going to make my decisions based off of that. And then I don't care. I think those are just, because of our Constitution, certain things, it can check those people. But we're starting to see it more and more. We're starting to see it with President Biden, him doing that a little bit with his son, where there was a lot of things where he did a lot of overreach. You know what I'm saying? With his son, with the Hunter Biden files, all these things like that, or Hunter Biden laptop stuff. There was a lot of overreach there, and then you're also also seeing it now with President Trump, where it's like, man, they're just doing stuff, and then you having court orders, and they're like, yeah, we ain't paying attention to that. That to me, that's when we get really, really dangerous, when people start saying, no, I know better than the system that's been working for the last couple hundred years.
How do you lead authentically within the terrarium, especially when you're dealing with the pressure of like a constant fear of exposure? And who's an example of someone who leads well within the terrarium right now?
That's a great question. I would say that, the way that you lead through it right now is the fact that you have to be, first and foremost, you have to be willing to be a non-anxious presence. You have to be self-differentiated, because when you're inside the terrarium, there's going to be things and people look at you, and they're going to have certain expectations for you to respond. So let's think about right now, you're leading through immigration. You have half the country who think that if you put any checks in or any whatever, like any type of like protocols or whatever, or if you send any other people back or you do whatever, then you're mean, you're harsh, you don't care for humanity. That's one side. Then you have another side that wants you just to be like, man, anybody that is an illegal person here, send them all back, don't care about their family, all that stuff, right? And so what you end up doing, if you're leading, you feel the pressure both. And so what you'll tend to do is like, you'll lean one way or the other, versus the idea of like, what if the best thing right now, because that's what I think the issue is, because this is a process, we just didn't get into this overnight, that then you have to have a long-term, you have to have a perspective, you have to have a plan. So you're not going to be able to, let's move everybody out right now with all this, like, like all these harsh rules and stuff like that. That's not smart leadership, but you have to do that because you feel the pressure on one side, versus saying, no, what's best? What is best for the safety of our country? What is best though for treating people like humans? And so you have to live, again, self-differentiated, that idea where you have very strong convictions, but then you also have empathy. When you have strong convictions, you don't allow people's anxiety to change you. And then when you also have empathy, that also does means you're willing to still care for people. Because a lot of times what people will do is out of feeling other people's anxiety, they go to fight or flight, right? You end up just caving, or you start fighting against people, not caring for people. And that's wrong as well. So I think right now, one of the most important things is people being self-differentiated. And I think you get that by having a very clear mission personally and having very clear core values internally.
Who's someone who does it well right now?
That is a great freaking question. Man, I'm gonna have to think about that. For example,
you can just say me if you want. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
I would say like, and again, I don't think he's perfect. I'm just thinking about somebody who's more like public, whatever. I actually like Mark Cuban. I'm not saying he's like a perfect, but when I listen to him, like, I think he's very practical when it comes to like, financially. I think there are some things like, like he has views that I think some people that I would guess that he sits kind of a little bit like center left, but he has views I know people on the left cannot stand. Someone else who I think at times really is this way, Scott Galloway. I think Scott Galloway at times is somewhat like that, where like you think about him, and then all these men are not perfect, but you think about a Scott Galloway right now, and I'll get back to Cuban as well. It's like Scott Galloway, his idea of the war of men and talking about the idea of raising up young men. Listen, on the far, he sits left. That is not a popular conversation on the left, what he does and what he's saying. But he's a realist. He's practical. He's like, yeah, okay, you keep treating young men this way, it doesn't go well. History shows us that. And so, and his whole thing is like, you can lift up women and lift up men. They don't have to be separate. That is a non-anxious leader. That's being self-differentiated, is that right there. So I think Scott Galloway does a good job in those aspects like that. I think he does a good job when he talks about finances and economics at times. He's again, he understands finance. And so because he understands that, he's looking at the market. What is truth? What is not? Regardless of political ideologies, right? Now, he's not perfect in all those things. And then going back to Mark Cuban, I think Mark Cuban is the same way. I think that he's a guy who has some, like, he's not off the reservation left when it comes socially, but he's also not at the reservation right when it comes to economics and things like that. And so I think there's this tension.
Did he help do the Amazon pharmacy?
No.
Who does that?
No, Amazon Pharmacy is through Jeff Bezos, but what he didn't know, but he actually did cost plus drugs. So he does.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so he has his own thing to where they create their own pharmacy where he partnered with a guy who was kind of doing this to where, certain drugs that maybe cost $3,000, like that people will sell like to insurance companies now, they have it on their website. They can get it for like $40 and stuff like that. And he said it's a legacy thing for him. He said that's one of the most important things he's doing, because that's allowing people for health and wellness, and people even for their lives to be able to do that. So when I've listened to those two, those would be, I think right now off the top of my head, those are two people who I think actually do a good job. And there's probably more, but those are two people that pop up in my head right now.
Those are good examples. For our listeners who just heard us kind of jump from the current, what's happening currently politically, and also to what it means to lead in the terrarium, what is one practical thing that you would like for them to walk away with? And especially, what does it look like to live as someone who is younger, let's say Gen Z, more millennial, who isn't sure what they're supposed to do with the current state that we're living in and how to carry a proper level of responsibility?
I remember reading this quote. I went to the University of Kentucky, and I was when I was doing basketball skill training, and we were there working at a pro guy. And in their locker room, or it was in their locker room, or their dorm, or their apartment area, and I can't remember where it was at, but it says, "Be the teammate." It says, "Be the teammate that you want to play with." And I think how I would say, what should we do? Be the leader that you want to be led by. I think so many times we look at leaders and we look at other people versus saying, how can I right now be the leader? If I was in that position, this is the type of leader I want to be led by. Become that leader. Become that person right now, because you have influence or whatever. Because most people who are listening to this, at some level, there's some level of leadership on their life. They're leading something, maybe, right? Maybe it's your family. Maybe you got a couple direct reports, whatever it may be. But instead of keep looking out here, be the leader you want to be led by. And what does that look like? You practice being non-anxious. Practice being non-anxious with your friends. Like when you get around your friends and you may have an opposing view than your friends, man, say something about your opposing view, but don't have to be a jerk about it. But don't cave. How do you go? Do you fight or flight? Like, be aware. See, these are the small ways that you learn how to lead. I tell people leadership and development happens in everyday life. It happens when you learn how to deal with individuals all the time, because that's all leadership is. Leadership is literally leading people. It's influence people. It's carrying, it's the idea of carrying weight toward a mission. And so how do you carry weight? You have to have people help you carry weight. So you can learn how to be a leader just through your everyday friendships and relationships. When someone's starting to talk about an idea you don't like, do you ever check, how do I respond in that moment? Because if you eventually lead a lot of people, they have different ideas. I mean, I think I look around here, there are so many different things of different people we have to lead, right? As a black male, I have those who are young black men, those who are older black men. I have younger white women. I have younger black women, Latino, on and on, that actually are part of our organization. I have those who come from two-parent homes. I have those who come from unstable homes. I have those who came up with a great childhood. I have those they had to deal with abuse. I have people who've had bad leadership. We have people that work for us that's had good leadership. All of those things come into play. And so you have to learn how to navigate and lead through all of those things. That is why you have to know who you are, because everybody, you look at this, if we went around and polled everyone that was in our office, for example, 20, 25 people, if you went and polled all these people here and asked them their different opinions about leadership and stuff like that, they all would have so many different thoughts about that. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine if you just kept caving to all those different things, or you rejected all those different things? You wouldn't be a good leader. But that's why you have to have a very clear mission and purpose and very clear values that have to guide your life. And you learn to get those through just everyday life. Hey guys, I hope today was actually helpful for you. Listen, we jumped on a lot of different things, but again, so much of what we talk about is on leadership. And in our era that we're living in right now, where I think times people are afraid to lead because of what's going to be said about them, let me just leave you with this. You can never lead anything that you're afraid to lose. You can never lead anything that you're afraid to lose. I think so many times today we have leaders who are afraid to lose their power. They're afraid to lose their influence. They're afraid to lose the perks that come with leadership. And that is not why you get in leadership. You get into leadership to care for people. And so I want to encourage you that if you are leading today, be the leader that you you want to be led by. Be the leader that's willing to sacrifice. Be the leader that's willing to not be shaken or moved by current cultural trends or everyone's anxiety. I think if we can start practicing that leadership in the next generation, it isn't just going to be that from the top. It's going to be influenced by those in the everyday life. Until next time, keep writing the rules.